Hey, my friends. I am in beautiful Thousand Oaks, California, and I have the pleasure and honor of interviewing my good friend John Naulin from Re-Animator, among many other films. Truth be told, we have a long history together. We've worked on a lot of things together, part of companies and all that kind of stuff. So, super cool guy, and just one of the geniuses of the film whole situation. So, yeah, so let's get right into it. All right, hey, my friends. So this is John Naulin from Re-Animator. We're good friends. We've known each other for a bazillion years. So I just wanted to kind of have a casual talk with John and you all about film. So who are you, John?
I guess I'm that guy in the mirror every morning, you know. And he's getting really old. I don't know.
You look great, man. You look great.
I still feel I still feel the same as I did as a teenager. You know, in here.
Yeah.
And the imagination and the storytelling and all of that is kind of just still part of who I am. But you know, but like I said, the mirror. I wish I had that picture on the wall that got old. Well, I didn't. But
oh yeah.
Dorian Gray.
Dorian Gray. Yeah. No, I hear you. I think we all want that.
Yeah.
So how did you get started in film?
I grew up in a family of Germans from my dad's side.
Mm-hmm.
And a family that was primarily English-Irish on my mom's side. So if we didn't entertain each other, we would probably kill each other. I mean,
right.
It was like you know, from a genetic standpoint, it's like I'm a world war, you know. So everybody kind of I grew up with a generation of storytellers, and my dad had worked with the Northwest Service Command in the military, building the road through the wilderness that is now the Alaskan Highway, and against impossible odds and all of that. And people are going, well, yeah, weren't there people dying? I said, yes, there were, but there were also Japanese airfields in the northern islands, and a lot of people don't realize that Japan extends into the Arctic. And you could go from those islands into attacking America. I mean, basically through Alaska, and do it very easily. And we had absolutely no other route than by ocean, you know, to get up there. So they built a road, and they had to be able to build a road to be able to get supplies and stuff up there. So that was one of the biggest early projects of the war. So it's known as the hidden war. So my dad grew up telling us stories about it. I grew up with him telling all the stories about going from being in the horse cavalry to working with the Inuits and the natives up there and doing all kinds of stuff. And my grandpa was Piccolo Pete, you know. So my grandpa on my mom's side was his radio show, the Piccolo Pete Hour, was the very first NBC broadcast test show. It was the broadcast between Cleveland and New York and Philadelphia, and it was the test of the very first network. So the first radio show ever shown more than locally, or ever played more than locally.
Piccolo Pete.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
And, you know, he came out of vaudeville. He also came out of minstrel shows and all of that sort of stuff. He had been Al Jolson's partner for many years, but he and Al Jolson did not believe the same things at all.
Right.
Al Jolson turned out to be
beep beep.
Yeah. Yes. Excise this entire part of the video. Yeah.
No, that's fine. We'll leave it in.
A lot of bigotry and stuff like that. So
yeah,
my grandfather walked away from him, and but he did make friends with one of the comics, who was known as Buckeye Bob Hope, and so on the very first link up of NBC, The very first comic to ever be on there was Bob Hope, which is why they called him Mr. Radio. And he's known as the history. And my grandfather, who died of multiple sclerosis at age 39, basically, faded.
Wow.
But I grew up around the history of it. So I inherited his makeup kit. And I inherited, so it's like, I figured.
So it's definitely, it's in the blood.
Yeah, it's in the blood. I got a makeup kit. I'm in theater. I've got a good voice. My dad ended up, after some not so great things business-wise, ended up working with a membership department store thing called Gemco, which was owned by Lucky's. And he ended up he bought this stereo system that had a 4-track reel-to-reel recorder in it with with all the mixers and all of that stuff. So I started making my own little radio broadcasts at home. I started doing voiceover work. I started doing impressions. I ended up being Rich Little hired me to be on his first episode of the Rich Little Show, and I bumped into him at the Arizona State Fair with my wife. And so I grew out of getting involved in theater and getting involved in radio, being an intern at KPHO Channel 5 television in Phoenix, and kind of evolved up into, on our honeymoon, we went to Universal Studios while we were over here from Phoenix, and we went to the makeup show there, the old Land of a Thousand Faces.
Cool.
And after the show, we walked through a door just to avoid the crowd that turned out it led into a shop and a studio lab area. And I walked into that shop, and it was like deja vu. It's like I had dreamed about it. I had lived there. Or, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was like
it's just like you feel like in your element. Like I know this.
I knew it was part of my future. So when we moved out here later that year, I got a job in the Land of a Thousand Faces, in the shop to start with, and then eventually as a supervisor. But I got a job there, and I started making friends with the lab guys. And one of them introduced me to a guy named Johnny Gone, who at the time, again, a name you'd never heard of, because he didn't want you to hear it. He built the magic illusions. He built the biggest magic illusions in the world.
Wow.
And I, at that time, was playing around with early materials, versions of foam latex and versions of silicone for reproduction of certain human elements and body parts and things like that. And so I made friends with John, and whenever he needed a replacement body part to show or to pop up in a magic illusion, I would make that for him. And that led to me working with Orson Welles in the Orson Welles Live from the Magic Castle, his last big TV broadcast. And it led to me working with Doug Henning. It led to me working with Doug Henning on Broadway. It led to, I went to Don Post Studios, and I became head of their special projects, and I took all that magic work over there. And
so what's Don Post Studios?
Don Post Studios, Don Post Sr. had invented or co-invented slush casting latex, which is basically to take a negative mold, you put latex rubber in there, which is a gum rubber mixed with certain clays to make it stronger, and basically latex gloves, all of that. Okay, so that's latex. And in the 30s, he realized that you didn't need a cored mold, a mold with an interior to it. If you poured latex in to a mold that had gypsum in it, like plaster, there would be a chemical exchange, just kind of like the milkshake lining the inside of the glass. Basically, when you poured that back out, it would leave a layer which would dry and form a mask. And the masks that were used for the FBI recreations for the Brinks job, that was one of the projects that they did for that they did at Don Post Senior. He did a lot of stuff during World War II. For D-Day, they had paratroopers. So the idea was to keep people from actually shooting the paratroopers. We'll put 3 times as many paratroopers in the air as there are paratroopers, and we'll make them out of rubber, and we'll make them in miniature, but perfect scale miniature. So you also can't tell exactly where they are. So
That's brilliant.
They threw thousands of those out, and they were coming down by the thousands, and people were shooting at rubber dummies that were also the wrong size, so they're aiming in the wrong places, which made them very unconfident in their aiming, period.
Wow.
So that was a big thing for D-Day. They also made paper bags that were lined with rubber that they used to put large pieces of ordnance, rolling ordnance, like tanks and personnel carriers and stuff like that on. They put them in these big bags. They sealed them and they put them on the ships on pallets so that they would not rust on their way across the ocean.
Okay, so like moisture barriers, what the
moisture
rubber became.
barriers, right? And then they realized they could also, for the secret. I don't know if you've heard of the Ghost Army, but the Ghost Army was a kind of a very interesting secret project the government was involved in, and it basically meant using fakes, which they started using for targeting practice, and then they realized, it's really hard to tell, especially aerial photography and stuff like that. These look real.
Mm-hmm.
So we could actually make it look like we've got 50 tanks instead of 12 tanks. Plus, again, there's the diversion. If you shoot one of the fake tanks, you're not shooting a real tank. So, but in the Battle of the Bulge, they literally used elements of the Ghost Army to make it look like their reinforcements had not arrived yet.
So this is all like the Post studio, like
Don Post did a lot of that sort of stuff. And he got involved with John Chambers, and they did all kinds of special projects for the industry, and they also made masks that they sold to the public. But, in the Battle of the Bulge, they literally used elements of the Ghost Army to make it look like their reinforcements had not arrived yet.
So this is all like the Post studio, like
Don Post did a lot of that sort of stuff. And he got involved with John Chambers, and they did all kinds of special projects for the industry, and they also made masks that they sold to the public. And I came in and I took over the special projects side of it, all the film projects, TV projects, government projects, and I also took over the running the art department, the design, development, materials, and basically I was there for 5 years.
Right on. Basically, you got like a vast knowledge of all the chemical stuff and like how to do different things so you could have different applications. And
to this day, if you go to buy latex to make a mask, they will stick the number 407 on it. And that is based on the Don Post 407 R&D latex formula that Rob Daub, who was actually the R and the D from R&D, it wasn't research and development, it was his initials, Rob Daub. Rob Daub Sr., just before he retired, and I formulated. So the formula that is still emulated and the most trusted name for mask rubber still today is 407. And that's all based on a formula I did for Don Post back in the 1970s.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So basically, all of the masks that people are wearing, like, these days and whatnot, basically there's a bit of John Naulin in all of it.
A little tiny slice. A wafer thin slice of myself. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, And I do a lot on the boards, like the Don Post Facebook boards and things like that, and I answer questions. And at one point, I was I as using the cumulative I as we Don Post Studios. I was one of the largest importers of natural fiber hair, wool, in the United States.
Wow.
When it came to camel hair, yak, Scottish blackface sheep, all these sorts of specialty wools, I was bringing them in because we were using them in our upper end masks as hair.
Wow.
One of the special projects we did was for the Dark Crystal, for the Jim Henson Company. And they had these characters, the two lead characters were named Jen and Kira.
Mm-hmm.
And they had very long hair. And they also had very smooth skin. They were having trouble with the foam latex, which I was brought on to solve. I had just done a version of foam latex called R&D 318C, which we sold at Post. It was a product we sold. And they had, I'm trying to remember Jim's last name. Anyhow, they had their technician in New York at the Brownstone, the Henson Brownstone in New York. And we talked on the phone, and by the time I actually got back there, he had already solved the problem. Using a non-detergent wetting agent that we had talked about. Anyhow, so the bottom line is I was doing a lot of elastomeric research and a lot of materials and paints and the natural fiber wools, and all of that led, and the special projects. I mean, we did 44 special projects in the last 2.5 years that I was there, including 156 still suits for the movie Dune, which were actually nominated under the costumes category, but the scene they showed was the still suits for an Oscar. And we worked with Bob Ringwood and Mary Vogt for that. We did, and I worked a lot with David Lynch directly. So I did a couple other things with David. And then after I left Post, I was doing some projects with a young sculptor that we had done some work with at Post, and we did some miniature stuff. We did some work for Battle Beyond the Stars, which is where I first met the Roger Corman Special Effects Department.
Oh, that's
very
awesome.
Few people know was James Cameron.
Wow.
All right, Robert Skotek, Dennis Skotek, and Mark Shelton. And Mark and I still are friends. We did a lot of work with Bob and Denny. We did a lot of work in fact, you and I met.
Yeah, no, Bob and
doing
just for those people who need to know who Bob and Denny are, they won the Academy Award for Aliens.
They won 4 Academy Awards for visual effects.
Yeah, for visual effects.
Yeah, including the bits and pieces that were actually done optically for Titanic. And so I got involved doing stuff with them. They referred me to a project years later called Biodome, which has now become like this weird cult film.
Pauly Shore.
Yeah, Pauly Shore. They're actually talking about making a sequel.
Wow.
And the Biodome never existed. The Biodome, all 23 shots of the Biodome were a miniature and some forced perspective that was rather clever. There were some full-size elements of the interiors that they did with the truss work and stuff like that that they did on the back lot of Universal. But other than that, we shot it all out near Palmdale, and we shot it all in a 4-day period of time. Denny Skotek came out and headed up he was the DP, and he and Mark Shelton shot all 23 of those plates. So
that is great.
Bits and pieces. And one of the things that I learned is I've learned in the industry that storytelling is so important. The effects are not. I mean, the effects are like the frame on the picture. If it's not a good picture, the frame's not going to make it a good picture.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a really fabulous piece of art, if the story is really magnificent, you don't walk up and go, well, I really like the frame. You know, I mean, if they've mated the frame to the story, to the story and the picture properly, you don't even see the frame, but it adds to the story.
Right.
It adds to the presentation. It adds to the effect, and that's exactly what I always tried to do, was to be the effect that added to the story, not the effect where people went, really cool monster, man. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we tried to create characters that were based on certain elements of reality. You know, I did a little tiny little film for Shapiro Glickenhaus called Maniac Cop. And I played around with actually a disease that the actor playing Maniac Cop, Robert Zadar, actually had, which is the fact that his bones grew out of proportion. The same thing is, well, it's similar to a version of the same disease John Merrick had in The Elephant Man. And so the bottom line is this was based on something that was real. And so when you could augment it a little tiny bit or point it out or make it work for the story, it it just added. It just made it cooler.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It doesn't replace it, it just makes it cooler. And that's kind of where I always went with, you know, Re-Animator, From Beyond, you know, all of that sort of stuff as well.
Okay, so Re-Animator and From Beyond. So what did you do on? Because I'm going to use a thumbnail from Re-Animator. So what did you do on Re-Animator?
Well, I was in charge of special effects makeup for Re-Animator. When you do an effect, we call them gags.
Mm-hmm.
There were 86 gags in Re-Animator. And we shot the principal photography of Re-Animator in 19 days for $719,000.
Wow.
All right, for you to understand, this was a really low budget movie. The director was the founder of the Organic Theater in Chicago. He had a theatrical background. He'd never done a film in his life, and which is not a bad thing. This was his first film, and he turned out to be an incredible visual storyteller, and that's Stuart Gordon. All right. In the first 3 days of the film, the footage was coming back really dark and kind of muddy looking, so they got rid of the director of photography, and they brought in a new director of photography who also just completely changed the whole thing. And he had a very, very strong, a guy named Mac Alberg. And Mac Alberg had a very European flair to him. And he really understood, old-fashioned filmmaking.
Yeah.
And he really loved films like Frankenstein and things like that.
Classics.
And I can, you know, I mean, I have told this before on camera, but I'll tell it again because it's my magic moment as far as that whole film kind of encapsulates in this moment. We were doing a gag. Stuart, myself, the performer, we're over, and I think Tony Dublin was doing a physical effect. He was doing all the physical effects and stuff, and he was doing a physical effect in association with it. And Tony and I were you know, we shared title credit and stuff. So we're there together. And he also had the project first and got me the job. So credit's credit. All right, that's wouldn't have been there without Tony. So we're there. We're working on this gag, and they had obviously Stuart had told Mac Alberg where to put the camera and what was going to happen and all that sort of stuff. And so Stuart looks up at Mac and goes, so Mac, how does that look for you? And remember, Stuart was a theatrical director. He hadn't gone and checked this out through the camera. And Mac just looks at it, looks through the camera, looks back, looks through the camera, goes, Stuart, I'm certain this looks fabulous from where you are. But from over here, it looks like shit.
That's classic.
Yeah. And it was like, here's the educational moment on set is like, if it doesn't look good in the perspective of the lens, the camera, the vanishing points, things like that, it obviously you're telegraphing the effect. You're doing something that's not working.
Right.
So it's always how it looks through the camera. And so we shot the film. We went back and shot 3 days of post-production stuff. They used another makeup company to do some of the background makeups for some of the zombie type characters. I mean, our budget for the effects on this was under $50,000.
Wow.
Under $50,000. And to do 86 gags, do the math. Sculpture, molds, castings, painting, foam, mechanics, all of that sort of stuff. They just don't happen without a certain amount of money. So we had no more money. We had a lot of people running around that were dead and reanimated in a couple of the scenes of the movie. So what do we, how do we do that? Well, Charlie Mann's company owed the producer of Re-Animator. He owed Brian some money, so he basically offered to have John Beegler and his guys come in and do certain things on the film. So the pre-title sequence in Re-Animator, I wasn't even there.
Oh, wow.
The whole thing where he's holding the thing up to his face and the eyes blow up and all that stuff. The quote unquote shot from Germany. I was not even in the building.
Crazy.
So I saw that for the first time in the first rough cast and crew screening. I will also tell you another little story is, the guy that played Dr. Hill,
Mm-hmm.
David was a classic actor. David Gale. He was a stage actor. He was somebody that Stuart had come in contact with in Chicago and really respected his work, talked him into doing this movie. And, looking at the original Re-Animator, which was released non-rated.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The head-on-head sequence.
Yeah, classic. You'll have to watch it to see it.
To believe it.
To believe it, yeah.
To believe it, yes. And in the original cast and crew screening, David Gale had brought his wife from New York. During the screening, she got up and left. She went to the hotel. She packed, left a note to him saying, if you want to do stuff like this, we're going to have a really long talk. And went and got on a plane and left the state.
Wow, that's crazy.
Wow, yeah. So very few people know that. And little did she know the film was going to come out. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. They had one copy. They had one print. And there were so many people in France that wanted to see this movie that they had 3 theaters. And they were taking reel by reel and running them from the one theater to the next theater to the next theater to the next theater.
That's amazing.
And literally having a group of couriers taking the reels from theater to theater to theater, so they didn't have people rioting in the streets of Cannes wanting to see Re-Animator. So
wow.
And the film came out and did over $30 million in Europe, which by percentage of return on investment is one of the highest grossing films in history. And, several 100,000%, and it's like, who knew?
Who knew?
I knew that Stuart, I was one of 3 or 4 people that knew that Re-Animator was a theater of the absurdist type of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
It was not shot that way. It was most of the film 90% of the film was shot dead on serious.
Yeah. And
And
that's what sells it.
it was only in the magic of those other moments
Mm-hmm.
that the absurdist moments where it goes further and further and further beyond what you think it's going to go, that it becomes just in shock value. It becomes funny. At the world premiere, which the U.S. premiere, the U.S. premiere was held in Hollywood, and we were at that screening as well. And my wife and I got behind three guys that were sailors. And obviously, they didn't know that they were in line for a premiere. They saw a line for a movie. They thought, well, let's go to a movie. And they were wearing their sailor suits with their little sailor hats and the whole bit. And when we get to the head-on-head scene, they're like these three guys, and they're sitting there. They're going, oh no, there you go. He's not gonna. Oh dear, and these guys are starting to grab onto each other's shoulders, and they're like, oh no, oh God, and as a storyteller, we're just sitting there. My wife and I are just sitting there afterwards, like, well, we got them,
That's what you want.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, another Stuart Gordon original story, based on a bunch of bedtime stories he told his daughters, So, and we built Auntie, we built the giant insects and stuff like that for that. And again, we're at the world premiere of that, and we're behind a group of kids. And when Auntie dies, sorry, spoiler alert.
If you haven't seen the movie,
It was made 30 years ago. Anyhow, so the bottom line is, when Auntie dies, and these kids are crying, bawling their eyes out in front of us. Ah! And, Auntie was 9'4" of latex and polyfoam built on a puppetry frame. It was, it was in effect one way or another all the way through. It was also some stop motion technique. It was a new effect of using a split screen horizontally instead of vertically. Some really neat new toys that we played with, or they played with, and these kids bought it. 100%. Annie was real to them.
yeah.
And Annie had just died. That's probably the best. That's probably the best critique I ever got for a film.
Yeah.
These little kids, I made them cry. So, and please take that the right way, world. Do not cancel me. All right. It was my job to make them cry, and I did it, and they believed it. And if you believe, if you're going beyond the willing, you bring your willing suspension of disbelief into a theater, and we managed to get it to the point where you actually believe it, and you don't walk away going, well, the digital looked a little,
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, agreed.
If I've done my job correctly, you shouldn't even know I was there.
Hey, so John, you had told me about an actual ghost story on the set of Re-Animator.
Yeah. I kind of shared that one a little bit. Well, first of all, we shot Re-Animator on the old Mary Pickford stage. And this is one of the oldest stages in Hollywood that was an actual sound stage. And remember It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
All right, and they're at the scene where they're at the dance, and the floor opens up and the swimming pool is there. That's the stage.
That's
the
so cool.
stage we were on. So the pool actually still existed under the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a scene in Re-Animator where there's an elevator. All right, and it's towards the very end of the movie, and he's trying to escape and eventually try to reanimate his girlfriend, Barbara Crampton, and heading towards the elevator, fighting his way to the elevator, and there's this guy with this arm that's just like you know, dangling, basically this mostly eaten away arm. And the way we actually did that was they found me a real amputee.
Okay.
All right. And I had made a prosthetic arm, but now for the very very rarely can you actually chew into the flesh. You have to add stuff to it. So most stuff is additive looking, but in this case, I actually could make the arm smaller. So it looked really nasty, and it had the bones in it and all of that sort of stuff. So when when the character turns and chops the arm off, and then the arm falls into the elevator, he jumps into the elevator, closes the elevator, and then there's a shot of the arm laying on the elevator floor doing this. So the fact that it looked so good when we chopped it off was because we actually had this character, and he his name is Craig, and Craig was he still goes around to conventions nowadays. He's still got the piece that I made that fit up over his
That's
stump.
cool. Of course he does.
Of course he does. Yes. And so we've done that sequence, and now we're setting up to do the elevator sequence. And we're in this stage that's been around since the 20s. Right? Now, I got to set the scene here is we've got the elevator. It's a little bit raised up. We've got a section underneath it because, again, I've got space underneath it. And I can get down, and I'm working underneath there. And I have got Richard McGuire, who is standing in the elevator. Now, this was before, of course, long before Richard built the Black Pearl and all the other stuff that Richard is well known for.
What's the Black Pearl for those who don't know?
Well, the Black Pearl's the ship in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
Yes, and well-known designer, and so Richard is also an ex-82nd Airborne Green Beret. All right. So he is in the elevator. I'm under the elevator. And now what he's done is he's drilled a hole that is the center point for the puppet gag that we're going to use for me to reach up through the hole, do this, put a piece on the end of my elbow to emulate the arm so that I can then go and move the arm around. But from his standpoint, we've got the doors closed because we're trying not to make too much extra noise. I'm inside the elevator. He's inside the elevator. I'm below the elevator. So I can hear, I'm making a hole, So I cut the hole, and suddenly I hear this, and I'm hearing, from the walls of the elevator. I'm like, what the F is going on here? And I come shooting out from underneath the elevator, and I open, and Richard is standing there, and he is as white as a ghost.
Wow.
Now again, 82nd Airborne, not a tiny guy. Piss him off, he will kill you. This is what we're talking about. And he's like, did you see it? Did you see it? And I said, what? He goes, I'm in the elevator, and I'm looking at you cutting the hole, and I look up, and there's another dude in the elevator with me. Now remember, elevator, doors closed.
Yeah.
All right?
Holy cow.
And there is, and he goes, and this guy is like 5'10". He said he's in a vest and a skimmer hat, which is like, an old barbershop quartet type of character, but definitely oldie period type character, wearing glasses. He sees, for all intents and purposes, what could have been Harold Lloyd, in the elevator watching.
Wow.
With him. And he said for the first second or two, it's like, he's here from another film. He's, they were shooting Nightmare on Elm Street and around a corner. What is going on? And he goes, then the fact he goes, I'm in a sealed elevator and there's somebody else here with me.
Wow.
And that's when he leaped up into like full, I'm going to kill you stance, practically peed himself, made the weird noises, and the guy disappeared.
Holy cow, that's crazy.
So that's my story about the Mary Pickford stage.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a ghost story.
Well, I had to be there at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, a lot of mornings, to start doing prosthetics and things like that on actors. You know, when you're doing that type of effects,
First in, last out.
First in, last out, exactly. My last day there, which by the way, this was part of that last day. I got there the previous morning, and I left at 8:30 the following morning.
Ugh.
So I was about 27 hours, my last day on Re-Animator. Anyhow, so very, very, very strange night, including Richard McGuire seeing a ghost.
Yeah, definitely. Let's fast forward a little bit. So there was something that we worked on that was not makeup effects, but that was like third scale sets. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'd like to also talk a little bit about the journey between the two.
Let's do that.
I became fascinated with perspective. And like I said, I had done some miniature work with Carrie. I'd done some stuff in the past. We did some work on V and V the Final Battle, where I got to play with my chemical knowledge as well. Water is very hard to shoot in perspective miniature because in order to make it look right, you generally have to get up to the point where you're at. We're going to let's just let that there. It'll be done right there. Okay. Water is hard to shoot, you know, in this type of perspective in miniature, because the drops don't look the right size. Things don't atomize correctly.
Right.
Fog doesn't look like fog. You know, things like that. It just doesn't work. It looks more like smoke. Mm-hmm. You know, so you know, so what we use is they make the miniatures bigger. Well, we didn't have the budget to do that on V, and yet we had to have this sequence where there was this huge flood. The aliens were stealing our water. The good guys were going down there and blowing the water up, and we were shooting the full scale part of that in the old Hanson Dam water reclamation facilities in San Fernando Valley. So, all right, we obviously can't blow those up. They wouldn't let us. We tried, but they wouldn't let us. So we built a miniature of it. We've got it hooked up to a fire plug, so we have 650 pounds of pressure on it. It was the first time I ever used a digital controller. So we've got a Gilderfluke Smart Brick controller hooked up to it. And Tony Dublin, I was working with Tony, and Tony did all that. And what I had done was I had put a pre-mixture box into the manifold system. So the water would have to flow through that. And I added a trickle of wetting agent, non-detergent surfactant wetting agent. So what I did is I was actually able to break down the surface tension of the water and break it down so that I could make water smaller. And I could make the drops smaller. And I could make it look pretty darn good, even up to 1 inch to the foot.
Wow.
1/12 scale. All right. And that was the first time. You later worked with me on the we did the Dome of the Rock in 1/12 scale, and I also did the same thing with pyrotechnics, in the fact that I figured out how to make things look smaller and break up into smaller pieces and make that look good on film. And I will tell you that in V the Final Battle, I would say another one of our greatest critiques is we get a phone call from the editing department at Warner Brothers you've got to come over here immediately. And we get there, and they've got our footage, which has been rough cut with the actual first unit footage on the actual location. So we've got location footage, our footage, location footage, and then there's the explosion, and then the water, and the flooding, and the massive, the action shot. And the editor couldn't tell the difference. He could not figure out which was the live action and which was the miniature.
Wow.
And that was pretty cool.
That's,
yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. So I went further down that rabbit hole. When we were at Santa Monica Pictures, we started doing digital extensions where we designed them in the computer with we were augmenting the perspective and the vanishing points to be able to make things almost like they would be a digital matte extension, but by doing them physically, we could generate shadows and changes in parallax, so that would allow for a little camera movement and stuff like that you couldn't have with a matte effect. So it was very cool, and that was working. So when it came time to do Team America, we put all of that into perspective, actually into several scales. We did one miniature that was 1/72nd scale, and we did one miniature that was 1/24th scale. We did 2 or 3 miniatures that were 1/12th scale, but the master scale for the film was 1/3 scale. So a 6 foot.
So you're
person
talking about Team America right now.
Team America World Police. Yes. And we did a lot of fooling the camera. I will have to say that.
So what were the sets that we did on Team America?
Well, we did the original test footage, which was the face-off surgical set, which was all done to make it look like it was all metal, and it was metal. I mean, is actually done with aluminum, and then we went in and brushed patterns into the aluminum, made it look like stainless steel. So that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. We did that one, and again, by changing the patterns in it, we were able to make it look like it was much larger. And we even got it so that it expanded the reflections, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's not big, but pretty cool. All right, because in a miniature, you always hid anything that reflected.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this whole thing reflected, so we had to use the reflections instead of hide them, and we really pulled it off. So that's one of the reasons it was on the test. We also did the alley sequence in New York, where they drive the limousine that changes into the plane type of situation, and it's got all of the emergency fire escapes and all that sort of stuff in there. And we did that, and they used it twice. They used it for that sequence. They also used it for the sequence where he's in the bar and he's telling the story in the bar. Anyhow, they use it in 2 different sections of the film in 2 different ways with 2 different paint jobs on it.
Paris.
Yes, we did Paris. We did all of the foreground stuff in Paris. Everything that was the full scale or 1/3 scale. We did all of the Café Merde.
Café Merde.
Café Merde. All the sequences where they blew the guys back into the windows, the ooh la la lingerie, the patisserie, the bake shop, and all that. We did all those little tiny bits and pieces, and the perspective of it, and that worked really, really well. We did some of the stuff that we did for Cairo. Cairo was probably our biggest thing. I mean, we did all of Cairo, including the chase sequence. And then, ironically, the whole thing had to do is puppetry, so everything had to be 4 feet off the ground. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I mean, we built 44,000 square feet of tables.
Yep.
And we designed those tables in such a way that they were actually made much lighter and much easier to store and to put away and move around and to reconnect. And yet they were just as strong as making them out of heavier materials. And we did that by taking the wood and, creating a 90-degree angle, gluing everything, we made it all, basically we made patterns and we made everything into the patterns. And that's how we were able to do it and do it for the price they had.
Yeah, I remember making like those tables covered basically half of a warehouse, a shooting stage. You know,
44,000 square feet.
Yeah.
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 I mean, that's if you look at, you look at a good sized house being a couple thousand square feet, that's like 80 houses worth.
Yeah.
In scale. So we also got again a good compliment. If you look at the additional footage on the DVD from Team America World Police, you'll have Matt Stone and Trey Parker, and they're being interviewed. And what they say is, and Jim Dultz, the production designer, kind of mirrors this thought. What they say is that we had this fabulous crew that built this amazing world and everything that was so terrific, and then we went in and made this stupid little movie in it. And so I'll say thank you for that.
That's a pretty good compliment. It was a lot of work.
Yeah. I also, at one point we were talking about our company heading up the effects end of it, and we were going to be the master company for all of that. So we did recommend the pyrotechnician, recommended Greg Jean to come in and shoot the blowing up of the Eiffel Tower. And Greg Jean, if for those of you who don't know, the late Greg Jean, one of the top miniature guys in the world, 1941, goes back to Star Wars, goes back to all of that sort of stuff. And Greg was a dear friend, and I think that's the last time I saw him on set.
Wow. Those are great memories.
Yeah. We're dying. Help us, we're dying. It's been a wild trip.
It has.
I can, my wife and I started our company back when I was originally starting to do magic tricks and stuff for John Gone in 1977. But she did assist me. We did get to travel all over the world. We've done 130 film, television projects. I've worked on about $720 million worth of amusement design projects, including Epcot and Liberty Square for Walt Disney World, including what was supposed to be Westcott and ended up as California Adventure after the that's another whole film. There's another whole thing that I probably shouldn't tell. Not sitting in front of my Disney collectibles. But
Right.
But the bottom line is that it's been a wild world and a wild life, and we've had just one hell of a lot of fun doing it.
Yes, we have. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. This has been awesome. So yeah, it's a good friend of mine. I'm glad to do this and glad to share it with you all.